Today, I'm joined by Rachel Spencer, aka the Launch Queen. Rachel is a business coach and strategist with an expertise in all things launching and sales. She specifically uses her Launch Queen's method to help her clients sell out their online offers and scale their business to multi six figures. Welcome, Rachel.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
I'm so excited to dive into your chart together today. Rachel is my launch mentor, so I have had a very intimate experience with getting coached by her and experiencing her method and how she wields her magic. And Rachel, you are such an incredible example of somebody that is so all in with your business and your niche and like so confident in exactly what you're doing that it is just so clearly reflected in your chart. Like I pull your chart and I'm like, oh, okay. I get why she does what she does.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. I can't wait to hear all about it and be affirmed in everything that I do.
Yeah. Do you know much about your astrology? Have you had readings before?
So I have had readings in the past. I don't know very much. I obviously know my general astrological sign, but no, I don't know anything too in depth.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm obviously biased because I'm going to be talking about the parts of your chart that are this like perfect reflection of what you do. But yeah, let's dive in. Okay, so the first thing that I want to look at is your fire. So, for anyone that doesn't already follow Rachel, her online presence is just so like blow. Like the language that you use is BDE, big dick energy, fully expressed, fully present. And so, obviously, that's like fiery energy. But the way that you channel fire is really unique. So, first, your sun, you're an Aries, I'm sure.
Mhm.
So, the way that I like to break down the simple components, what these archetypes are, is getting back to the basics that they are one of the four elements and they're expressing in one of three modes of movement. So, Aries is the outward expression of fire. It's definitely kind of like half of the equation when we talk about that BDE confidence of just like, I mean, for people that aren't watching this as a video, it's just like flopping it out, right? You're just like, here, like you're putting it out there. And so it very much is that outward projection of your energy and like infusing that into everything that you present. What's interesting is looking at the house that it's in for you. So the sign is that kind of quality of energy. The house is where that's designed to land for you. And what's interesting to me is that it lands in your eighth house, which is something that we look at really deeply in my Cosmic Cash Code session as containing your codes of investing. And
Mhm.
I also like to broaden what we're talking about when we're talking about investing. It's not just money, it's anything that we sacrifice time, money, and energy for now to feed and support our future.
Mhm.
So when I think about launching, I'm like, oh, what a perfect way to embody that of fully fueling your fire into your right now and your preparation for a launch and how you're showing up before sales are even coming in. It's absolutely an investment for what you are doubling down on to like your vote of confidence for what's to come.
Ooh, yeah. No, that makes total sense because, being in Launch Queens, it really is all about devoting your time and energy ahead of time to your audience and to their experience and making sure that they are super warm. And so, yeah, there is a lot of, quote unquote, time and energetic investment that goes into it. And so, yeah, that makes complete sense.
Yeah, and the way that you always talk about warming your audience, which I know is probably not a new term for people, but like in the Launch Queens method, you literally almost invest more into the warm up than the
Yeah.
launch itself,
Hmm.
right? Total
Yeah,
testament to
no,
the signature.
totally. And I think that it's just a piece that a lot of people I don't know if it's that they forget it or they just don't realize that it's so important. And I always talk about it in the sense of going on a first date. It's similar in that idea of like investing your time ahead of time. If you're going on a first date that you're really excited about, you're likely not just throwing on a pair of sweats really quickly and jumping, out the door. You are most likely making sure that you're taking that full body shower, that you're curling your hair, you're doing your makeup, you're, listening to your music to hype yourself up, you're getting excited, you're putting on your favorite pair of heels, you're texting to make sure like everything's good, you're meeting at this place. There's so much that goes into it with both you and them before you're going on that first date. So I just love treating business, specifically launching and just like selling to your audience in the same way. It's like putting in that time ahead of time, not just so that you are excited for the launch, but that so your audience is really warmed up to the idea of buying from you. Because otherwise, again, going back to the first date idea, you're showing up to the date and they're already ready to go back to their apartment and you're like, hello, buy a girl a drink first, right? So that's kind of the idea. We want to make sure that we're devoting our time and energy into your audience, into that person before you go all in. So
yeah, I mean, I can offer the reflection as someone that's recently embraced this part of a launch and actually really enjoyed it. That for me, it was more like, because investing is risky. It doesn't occur to you to put that much time and energy into something that you don't know is going to have a return because you're not even selling at that point. But the archetype of Aries as well is also the archetype of the fool. It's like, no, I don't know how I know, but like, I know this is going to pay off. So I'm going to give it
like
my
me.
all. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Okay. The other aspect of your fire is your Leo, which your Leo rising. So whereas Aries is that outward moving fire, Leo, which is kind of that motivation to express, is actually inward moving fire. And so that's the component that's like the radical authenticity, being so tapped into the source of your expression that it is able to flow out so easily and that it is able to be so magnetic for people because you're coming from a really authentic inner flame that you're expressing from.
Totally. No, that definitely makes sense. And I think, I always talk about how one of my superpowers in business is helping other people, highlight their uniqueness or their unique angle, unique approach to what they do in their business and communicate that throughout their marketing. And so it makes sense if that's part of who I am, why I believe that that's so, so important to bring out of my clients as well. I mean, I always knew it was just something that I loved and something that was important to me, but you can tell just by you saying that it's something so much deeper.
Yeah. And so when it comes to our businesses, the rising is a good thing to look at for your branding. That is such a big part and ingrained into your brand, but also, like you said, how you encourage other people to think about their brand is like what should be a part of it is you, like authentically you.
Absolutely. Ooh, I love that. That's very cool.
So, okay, here's where we take a little bit of a twist. Actually, one more thing to just speak to around that Leo piece. So it is your rising, which again, it's like your brand. The reason that this works so well for branding is because your rising is how you first occur to people before they even really know you or go deeper with you.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that first presentation, or people call it the mask, right?
Yeah, very
so
cool.
it's like attracting energy. The other part though for you is it's also your code of expansion and scaling. So part of what opens up what's possible for you is, again, that like the more you show up fully embodied and expressed as yourself, the more things open up for you.
No, totally. And again, going back to my clients, I've had so many intensives with new clients where that's really the tweak more than anything else, because they have the strategy, they know how to post, they know the psychology behind what they're doing. They've worked with tons of mentors before, but I'm able to see something in them that I'm like, why aren't you highlighting that? Do you realize how special that is? So it's very cool that that's just such a huge part of it.
Yeah, that's a really great way to say it. Like your Leo is what makes you special. And also just getting really down to launch queens. There's royalty infused with your
Oh
brand,
yeah.
and that is the sign of Leo.
Yes. It's
Yeah.
just a feeling,
Yeah,
right?
totally. Okay, so here's where we take a turn and a twist from that fiery side of you, which is that your moon is in Cancer. For this, I also have to point to the house it's in. I don't always go there, but it's just like such a big part, I feel like, for you of how that shows up in your business. So for you, it's in your 11th house, which is both the arena of one way that we could say it is it's the arena of social media. It's that place where you network with strangers, basically, and
Mhm.
acquaintances, and that bigger kind of global network, basically. It's also the longer arc development that we go on in our own lives and in our, businesses as a vehicle for our growth and development. So Cancer, we're talking about the water element, and it is the outward expression of, it's the projection of water out into the world. And
Mhm.
so the way that ends up showing up, Cancer is the archetype of feeling at home,
Mm.
feeling comfortable in what's really going on for you, and really being able to land and let go. The two ways that I see this showing up that I'm aware of, although I'm curious to hear what you have to say because the moon is such a inner experience. But one is that often, like myself, we come to you ready for mentorship around launching because we've had trauma with it. And
Yeah.
we've had launches that have just devastated us. So now we have
Yeah.
these feelings that come up when we think about it, and it's uncomfortable. So, one is the way that, and I say despite because we're all paradox, right? But like, despite your super fiery energy, you also create this really safe space to
Mm.
welcome people in, come as you are. What has your experience been
Yeah.
before? That kind of half the equation. And then the other half of it is let's transmute that into you actually feeling really at home launching and being on
Yeah.
social media and that actually being a comfy experience.
Yeah. No, I try to for sure. In everything that I do, not even just with launch queens, but I'm thinking too, my private clients and my mastermind. And I was just talking to a woman in the DMs yesterday who said she would love to work with me, but she's really scared about the idea of investing again because her last coach wanted her to do, XYZ that she didn't want to do, that she was uncomfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And she felt like she was taking actions that didn't feel right, didn't feel like her, and it just wasn't a good fit. And now she feels confused and off course. And so she was like, I would absolutely love to work with you, but I gotta tell you, like, I'm scared of jumping back into another mentorship relationship like that before.
Yeah.
And so I know that that is a trauma for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so making people feel at home. I mean, the first thing I did was not convince her that I wasn't like that other coach because I don't think that's as helpful. The first thing that I did was validate her
Mm-hmm.
and help her feel comfortable opening up to me more and
Mm-hmm.
telling me more about that. And I just want people to feel like when they're in my DMs, and you know this too,
Mm-hmm.
when they're in my DMs and they're asking me about working together, asking me about a program, I don't want them to feel like I'm going to use some crazy sales psychology or like a wave a magic wand and force them to join or make them feel not good enough unless they join. Like that's not my vibe at all. I want you to feel like you are, like you said, at home,
Mm-hmm.
talking to a friend, talking to somebody that knows you, that loves you, that validates you, that hears you. And I think that that's a lot of the time why people end up signing up to work with me because they're just like, I want to sell in that same way to where people just feel so good that that's why they want to work with me, not because I used some like voodoo magic or mind trick. So absolutely, I feel that. And you know what? I'm sure you're going to get into this, but sometimes that gets me into trouble though, because I've had clients that come into my space that they feel so at home and we actually do become close friends and then boundaries are crossed. And I've lost clients that I thought were really, really good friends that end up putting me on that pedestal. I mean, there's so much I could say with that, but I let people in
Mm-hmm.
so much because I want them to feel at home and to feel safe and comfortable. And sometimes letting people in opens you up to getting hurt. So
Totally.
that's one thing I will say.
Yeah, I mean, on that piece, I think too, obviously, you want to create that safe space for other people, but also it's what nourishes you. Your moon, doing your moon for you is very much creating those spaces of intimacy where you
Mhm.
can go deeper with people
Yeah.
because that's part of what helps you to feel nurtured and nourished and able to stay the course through the cycles of
Totally.
business.
And I think of my own experience too. I've reached out to mentors before that I was willing to shell out a lot of money to work with. I'm talking about my experience. I'm sending multiple voice messages and they'll message back, "Oh, yeah, I can help with that. Like, let me know if you need the link." And I'm like, that didn't feel personal.
Yeah,
That didn't give what I wanted it to give.
right.
And it's from that experience that I'm like, okay, those moments, they don't make me angry. They more so teach me how I want to interact in a DM conversation
Mm-hmm.
because the way that I wanted to feel in that moment before investing a lot is how I want other people to feel.
Yeah, there's so much I want to reflect back with everything that you're talking about this experience of the Cancer side of your business. One thing is that space that you open up in your DMs, which again, like moon energy, Cancer energy in the 11th house of social media, that's that space that you create in your corner, your DMs, where you welcome
Mhm.
people into. And it's a fairly newer thing, this feminine way of business. And
Mhm.
I think some people, it's like if you go too far in that direction, it loses its it loses its
Yeah.
effectiveness. If it's nothing but just like, oh, I'm here if you want it, if you need it. I think part of the art of sales that you embody so well is both having the strategy and the oomph of that fire behind
Yeah.
it of like, hey, I'm stoked, let's get you stoked, that
Yeah.
sales energy. But like you said, not being pushy about it, just letting people know
Yes.
and helping people to move through their resistance as part of relationship building and genuinely not part of making the sale until they self-identify. I'm pointing to myself because I had the same experience in your
That's
DMs. Like,
exactly it. Yes.
being able to be like, oh, actually, this is where I need to be. I'm really clear about
Yes.
that. And in fact, when we ended up moving through my objections, it wasn't this weird, like, oh, we know what we're doing now. I was literally like, yo, I really want to do this. Here's what's in the way for me. Can you help me work through
Yeah.
this so that I can fully say yes and show up for what I know I need right now?
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that reflection and I love that you say that because the, quote unquote strategy piece of that is to get them to self-identify like you were saying. By holding space in that way, it's not like you're saying, well, like if you want to, like no pressure, like I'll be here, like let me know what questions you have. It's not like you're totally pulled back. You're meeting them halfway and you're saying, I want you to be able to self-identify and make this decision on your own, but I'm going to ask you the right questions
Right.
and make you feel comfortable to answer in a certain way to where you realize that this is the program for you. So that's that piece of like making you feel so comfortable and asking you the right things to where it's that balance of feminine and masculine strategy.
And as a testament to the no pressure that's part of that, I have been in your DMs several times before I actually invested and decided that it was
Yeah.
the time to join, and you showed up so fully every time, regardless of whether there was actually a sale involved or not.
You're making me feel so good. I'm like, yes, that's how it should be.
That's how it should be, but that's not often how it is. And actually, one of my biggest, I don't know if takeaway is the word, but like permission slips that my experience with you was for how I show up is I remember this last time when I reached out to you, you replied to me within like 2 minutes. Like you
Well,
were
that might just be because I'm obsessed with my phone. Let's not.
okay, so that's yeah, exactly. So I am too, and I always had without being super conscious of it. I would wait to reply to people because I had this thing, I think, of thinking like, oh, as a business owner, I don't want to seem too available. But
Mm,
I love responding to people right away. Like in my
yeah,
personal sphere, I don't do that. I'm very on it with my communications. I actually
totally.
really take pride in that. Like I
Yeah.
value that a lot. And when you did that, I was like, that felt so good. And it was just this total permission slip of like, screw that. I'm going to reply right away if I'm
Or
excited that someone reached out.
absolutely. Or even if it's just like, hey, I'm really busy right now, but I am here for you. Like, I can't wait to listen to these. I'll be right back. Like it's just
100%.
that validation. And again, it makes me think of dating, like all the
Mm-hmm.
mind games of like, ooh, can't text
I
that
know.
quickly,
Totally.
And it's like,
Yes.
because you are dating your ideal clients. And I'm not going to be that dude that has to wait 24 hours to get back to you, to
Totally.
seem like he's not that interested. Like, of course I want you to join my program. Of
Right?
course, I want to work together. So I'm going to show you how excited I am and let you know that I'm here and ready to listen. And my husband is very much like that too. He's an artist. And when people DM them, I remember like he'll like message right away or be like, oh, like, let's pause this. Like, I want to message this guy back. And I've even said before, I've been like, can't you just message him back like later on tonight? And he's like, well, no, because he has my attention right
Yeah.
now. And I want him to know that he's important to me and or whoever it is in the DMs. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, so he mirrors that as well. We take our businesses very seriously and we want the people who are ready, to invest in us to know that we take them seriously as well. And we're not trying to play those mind games. So
Right. Which is so
very true.
cool. And you brought up kind of the dark side of that too, which is that
Mhm.
you end up making people feel so comfortable and so welcome that
Yep.
it is very much a responsibility that falls on your shoulders to then set the boundaries, which was also inspiring to me because again, it felt kind of novel to be that open in the business side of things, for business comms. I was like, oh, I love that. That feels really good. But I think part of what the fear is that was wrapped in that made that kind of like an unconscious thing was exactly what you said, that then that opens you up to having to be really clear with your boundaries, which is something that for me, I was very cognizant to as a tax preparer when I used to do that, because it was communicating with so many people in such a short amount of time that it was absolutely by necessity that I had really
Yeah.
solid boundaries. But I really appreciated your example in what is now this new world of business that I've pivoted into, which is so much more about passion work. So, to your point, you're excited to talk to people about these things. So, that's
Yes.
where that openness comes from. But then being able to, and this is such a big part of mature Cancer embodiment, is also being able to speak those boundaries. And your example of that recently, when we were entering into a group container, you were like, hey,
Mhm.
by the way, I'm here, not shutting the door on you, but just a reminder, please start having these in our group container.
Absolutely. And again, I think we always learn from other people because that has been mirrored to me from other mentors as well, negative and positive. I've definitely had mentors that are like, I don't answer questions in my DMs, period. And I'm like, oh, okay. Do you want me to post it in the group? And I
Yeah.
feel awkward. And then I don't
Yeah.
even want to ask my question. I'm
Yeah.
like, never mind. And it just really turns me off versus when a mentor is like, hey, listen, I love this question. And because I haven't set this boundary yet, I'm going to go ahead and answer it for you. But future questions, let's put it in the group.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay. That made me feel like I'm not a bother. You're just setting a boundary. And
Right.
so because I've had mentors do that to me in the past, again, when that happens, you're like, okay, that's how I want to make other people feel. And so you're able to then mirror that. So yeah, that's something that I'm getting from everything we're talking about. I feel like I keep saying that over and over again. This is how I am because it's how I want to feel.
Right.
That's something that I'm noticing. Like everything you're saying, I'm like, oh, yeah, it's because when I'm in a DM
Yeah.
conversation, this is how I want to feel. When I'm getting boundaries set, this is how I want to feel. So I'm very cognizant of that other side and making sure that people, I don't know if it's because I'm super sensitive or what, but I'm like, I want to make sure that people feel that comfort.
Yeah, well, when it comes to Cancer energy, which I'm taking notes right now, I do not have any strong Cancer placements in my chart whatsoever. And I've always been really fascinated by that type of water expression because I'm all Scorpio, which is
Yeah.
a whole different flavor of the thing. But so much of what motivates you in terms of the space that you're creating is your empathy. You can't
Hmm.
help but feel how something makes other people feel, putting yourself
Yes.
in their shoes. And that empathy makes it really natural for you to create these really safe and open spaces for people to
And
welcome
I
them
think
into.
it's a beautiful thing. And again, going to like the dark side of that, I think it also is why it hurts so much when someone questions your integrity in that. And I've definitely had, speaking of like the DM conversation, I've had someone that months down the line comes back and will accuse me of convincing them to join in the DMs or something. And I will literally be like, I have receipts. I'll go back to, and
Right?
I'm like going back and I'm taking screenshots of where I'm like, no pressure. I want you to make this decision for
Yeah.
you. Cause I'm over here like, no, I am so thinking of the other person when I am selling and wanting them to
Right.
feel comfortable that if anybody comes back with those accusations, I really get hurt and into like defense mode. And so that's definitely something that I'm working on too, is realizing that that's not about you, that's them. But at the same time, I definitely am becoming less emotional about it and being like, no, 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 I know my truth. And I know that while making people feel comfortable is very important to me, and making sure that I am empathetic, that if they twist that and see a different truth, that's on them, you know?
Well, my guess is that it's a vulnerability hangover type issue,
Kinda, yeah.
for people. Yeah. Or they're like,
Hmm.
oh, actually, now I feel kind of uncomfortable with how open I just made
Yeah, could
myself on
be.
the internet, And
Yeah.
like, it's like, oh, no, I don't like what just happened. That was wrong.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes when you empower people in sales, this is something that I've learned is I'm very empowering when I am selling with someone. Again, it's not always in the DMs, but now that since we're using that example, I want someone to make the decision for themselves, not because I convinced them to,
Hmm.
or not because their friend joined or something like that. So that's why I'm asking so many questions. I'm giving them so much information. I'm making
Hmm.
them feel comfortable. And part of that is empowering them to see what's possible, and
Yeah.
empowering them to see the only thing holding you back in this conversation is you, and a lot of the time that level of empowerment feels good in the moment, but then whenever you come back to it, it almost feels kind of like you said, no, 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 why did you open me up in that way? Like that
Yeah.
felt
Or
like
like a
a
come
trick. I'm
down.
never that
Hmm.
vulnerable.
Right. Totally. Yeah.
It's like, no, 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 it wasn't a trick. That is the way that I sell, is getting people to feel really good about themselves so that they can make that decision, versus some coaches will make you feel really bad about yourself. And that's why they think you'll want to pay them.
Right. Yeah. The way that you combine those water and fire elements, like the empowerment side of the
Mhm.
fire and the vulnerability side of the water. I mean, when we get down to just
Definitely.
like the basic energetics of that, that is
Definitely.
truly an art where, there is this kind of warmth per se that comes from that Cancer homey feeling, but
Mhm.
not if it's just all on its own. It actually just feels watered down. It
Yeah.
needs that other part of it that's like, hey, the reason that we let our defenses down is to actually ultimately be able to like stand up stronger because we went
Yes.
there together and we opened up together.
So true.
Hmm.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So, the next thing I want to look at is something that you likely don't know about yourself. This is something that I'm so excited to reveal to people whenever I do astrology sessions, because I don't know of one, any other astrologer that talks about this, but two, any app or software that you pull your chart is not going to show you this, to my
Cool.
knowledge, which is the moon phase you were born under.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah. So the combination of your sun and your moon, the relationship between them. The reason I think this is such a powerful thing to know about ourselves is if you think about it, like now from moment to moment, that's the loudest energetic thing going on. Like you don't have to look at an app. You can look up at the sky and you
Yeah.
know what phase the moon is in. Not only that, but like people that don't even pay attention to this stuff, they know the difference between the vibe of a new moon and a full moon, right?
Yeah.
Big
No,
diff.
for sure. And just how like the mood affects your cycle, like it literally
Totally.
affects everything.
Right. So not only is this a huge part of the energy that imprinted on you, the moment of your birth, the moment of your first breath, it's also like your time of the month when you're the most grounded and resourced. It's like your cycle
Mhm.
home base,
Yeah.
basically.
Mhm.
So you were born during a waxing gibbous moon, which that is right before the full moon.
Okay.
So we're in the waxing part of the cycle, that kind of swelling energy, right?
Mhm.
Leading up to the full moon. And what I think is so cool about this, knowing what I do about how you show up and how you help people, is getting back to the way that you make art out of launching. A big one for me that I know you talk about a lot, so I know I'm not the only one, is that accepting, or maybe accepting isn't the word, but like acknowledging that probably most of your sales are going to happen at the end of the launch. And
Mhm.
so being connected with that awareness so that you can still keep your good vibes during the launch, even though maybe no one's buying yet.
Yeah.
And so the waxing gibbous moon is the most outward expression out into the world before the actual culmination and full expression of the full moon, right?
Mhm.
So the one thing I see is that's our most visible time. One of the things with a waxing gibbous phase is it's like being really invested in strangers, feeling very curious and interested in the experience of other people, and just
Yeah.
like the hustle and the bustle and the stuff out there, the actual lived experience of other people. So that's one thing, is you're all about by example and by
Yeah.
strategy, like teaching people like, hey, be visible, like don't be afraid to be visible when you're launching, right?
Totally.
And then there's also this piece though of that you are very invested in like other people's launches, right? That energetic of strangers, essentially, people on the internet, people that,
Yeah.
become more than strangers. And then this other piece where the waxing gibbous phase is like right before the full moon. So there's this feeling of the best is right around the corner, like, oh,
I
just
love that.
wait, just wait.
I love that. That goes back to like the teasing
Mm-hmm.
aspect too. Like, "Ooh, you
Mm-hmm.
just wait. It's coming. It's coming."
Mm-hmm.
Like that is definitely very, very exciting for me. That's something I wouldn't have even thought of, but now that you say it, I'm like, okay, when I am speaking about launching, a lot of the art of it is understanding your ideal client, understanding strangers and their
Mm-hmm.
experience and how they are feeling and reacting to your content and keeping that data and knowing them fully. So that investment into strangers, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's sales 101, at least in my world. It's just like really trying to understand your audience.
Well, and that's what's interesting. Once you understand yourself through your chart, this is like the water you're swimming in. So of course you think,
Yeah,
but doesn't everybody know this? Doesn't everybody think like this?
exactly.
I'm curious, energetically, the quality of the waxing gibbous moon is really aligned for you and your lens that you take for granted. What about that time of the month? Like, have you ever noticed that that time, like right before a full moon, is particularly something for
So
you?
the only thing that I will say is I have been on birth control since I was 14. So I
Mm,
don't have a normal cycle. So it's
gotcha.
very difficult for me to be able to tell that stuff. Like I
Mm-hmm.
definitely had a client who did hormone coaching and she would always talk about that. She was like, "Well, if you're on birth control, you don't have a normal cycle, like you
Yeah.
aren't really following the moon and all of that."
Yeah.
So hopefully in like the next year or so I'm going to go off birth control, which I'm
Exciting.
nervous about since I've literally been on it since I was 14, but
Mm.
I'm interested on that side of things of like really getting to know my cycle and the different phases and who I am during each phase and the way that I react and all of that. I'm very interested to learn that. But what I will say is I haven't noticed those things and I think that that's why.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. I can relate, though I was so much younger when I made that shift. I was on birth control for the first 6 years of having my cycle.
Mhm.
So I was pretty young when I made that transition, but I'm glad to be able to offer you this gem of knowing like what your most grounded and resourced
Yeah.
part of your cycle is, because
Mhm.
now, granted, again, I was really young, so maybe your experience being more mature in general will be different than mine. But oh my goodness, transitioning from never having known those
Yeah,
cycles, that was
I
at least a
know.
few months of feeling so crazy, like such wild mood
Yeah.
swings and
Oh,
yeah,
100%. And
yeah,
I always hear coaches, some coaches talk about how they launch with the phases of their cycle.
right,
And that's something I haven't experienced,
yeah.
but thinking back to my client again, who's a hormone coach, like she'll describe the different phases and the action she's taking in the phases and why and what that energy brings her or lack of energy, what she focuses on. And I'm just like, wow, that is so, so interesting. So I know as a launch queen that I'm going to become obsessed with that.
Oh my goodness. I'm getting chills just thinking about this for you, because it's like you've been obsessing from the logical, science, strategic
Exactly.
side of it with what
Mhm.
it means to go through these cycles. And
Yep.
oh, wow.
Now it's going to be much more like in my body.
Yes. Yes. That's so cool. Ooh, I can't wait to see
Yeah.
what that does to your work. And
Yeah. No, I'm
yeah.
excited for it. And I mean,
Hmm.
nervous, obviously, because I've been like balanced on birth control all these years,
Yeah.
but I think it could be like a beautiful thing just to get to know your body more.
I agree 100%. My experience was, like I said, a few months of total chaos, and then I settled into it. And now I couldn't be more grateful that,
Totally.
I have that rootedness into the
Yep.
cycles in my body.
100%.
That has me excited and is a really good segue to bring up one other topic that I want to
Mhm.
around where you're at on your path. Because obviously, we're looking at your birth chart as kind of a snapshot of what makes you you that is, evolving over the course of your whole
Yeah.
lifetime. I want to look at something
Mhm.
that's a little bit more timely.
Cool.
I'm curious if you are aware of your Saturn return.
I am not.
Basically, it marks the three big phases of our life that we can think of as youth, adult, and elder,
Mhm.
or like with the three faces of the woman and the goddess, the maiden, the mother, and the crone. It's like one of the coolest things I ever learned about astrology, right on time, thank goodness, because it's something that, like, it's wild to me that we are expected to know what we want to do with our lives and commit to at 18. We're told that we're adults at 18. It doesn't really happen until more
No.
like 30
Yeah.
ish, right? And so basically, the first Saturn cycle is a lot of just exploring, experimenting. It's kind of like the research phase of our life,
Mhm.
figuring out what's ours, what's not, what lights us up. Obviously, as we've explored, you have been pretty on point with like finding your way in this first
Yeah.
Saturn cycle. But the transition into your second Saturn cycle is a long one, by the way. It's like a 6-year transition and rite of
Oh, I think
passage.
I'm in it. I know where you're going. I'm in it.
Well, you're
Keep
actually
going.
like right at the end of it.
Oh, thank
So,
God.
yeah, yeah. And I was so excited to tell you this today because I was like, oh, she probably doesn't know. So, you've been in it for the last 6 years,
That's
basically.
so funny that it's 6 years because I've only really felt it the last, like, 3, but it's like you said, it's like a cycle, so I guess that was, like, the peak, was, like, the
Exactly.
3-year mark.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, no, I was like, "I know where you're going with this," because it was like I had it all figured out, and I was at the peak of my career, and little 10-year-old me would have never believed I was where I was at, and then it was 3 years ago, I started to kind of falter and be like, "Whoa, like, this doesn't feel the same way it did,"
Hmm.
and, like, "Is this what I wanna do?"
Hmm.
And last year was the absolute hardest where I was like, do I burn my business to the ground? Do I just
Hmm.
want to go passive? What does my life look like
Hmm.
from here on out? And I feel like I'm at a place now where I'm just starting to like figure it out again. Cause I went this past year going back to everything we've talked about, and I've never talked about this publicly, but I was really, really hurt by a falling out with a couple of clients. And I very much took it personally. Again, like we spoke about, making people feel safe and loved and being in integrity is so important to me, that when clients accuse me of things, or they don't like me anymore, quote unquote, going back to the little girl in me that was
Yeah.
bullied, I'm like, oh no. And I feel like shit about myself and all of that. And so I went through a phase where I was like, that hurt so much, I'm closing my heart. Like, I'm never launching my mastermind again. I no longer taking one-on-one clients. I'm going fully passive.
Yeah.
And I hired a coach to help me build out my funnel for Launch Queens. I was like, I don't want to launch it anymore. I don't want any access to people, which is so crazy, because everything we're talking about is, that's part of my superpower, is the way I interact with people and the way that I make people feel. But I was like, I'm just so done. And so I went through like 9 months of pivoting my business to be fully passive. Like, I don't want any interaction with people. I was angry. I was mad. And I took an extra step back whenever I was starting my second business, my Airbnb with my husband and all that stuff. But all that is to say, when the Airbnb was finished and we started crushing it on that end, I was like, okay, I need to figure out what's going on with coaching now. Am I still passive or what? And I just felt like I really miss working with clients, which is so weird, because for 9 months of my life, I was mad and I didn't want to work with them. But I was like, I miss this interaction so much. And I signed my first one-on-one client in like a year. It was actually a group of two girls, so I'll say one-on-one clients, but they're one business. They were just the perfect ideal client, in the sense that I was like, okay, my standards have raised now. And I think that I had to go through that to realize who I am now, what I want, what type of clients I want to work with, raise those standards, all that kind of stuff. And since then, with relaunching Launch Queens, I have a couple more one-on-one clients. Now I'm relaunching my mastermind. Things that I was never going to do ever again feel so much more right now. And so I feel like I'm going back to where, I want to be and what feels good, but I went through all that chaos before I could get here. So that's what I'm getting from from what you were saying about the Saturn return.
So beautifully
But I've
articulated.
never told that story ever. So y'all
Yeah.
get the exclusive.
Well, it kind of makes sense that you feel okay to say it now. You are landing finally right now on the
Mhm.
other side of a rite of passage where the biggest confrontation is to let go of whatever you're most attached to. And for you, it was working with clients, right? And launching the
Yeah.
things that are your things. You had
Right.
to
Crazy.
completely, yeah, it does feel
Mhm.
crazy, right?
Like, how could I ever not want to do that? Now that I'm back in it, I'm like, what? Why? But I had to go through it. I had to
Yeah.
let that go for a bit.
Right. And like you said, it's like a reset so that on the other side of it, it makes so much more sense because you let go. It's like you let go of the thing that you were attached to let go of your attachment to it. So that
Totally.
ultimately you could bring it back in without
Yeah.
the entanglements that were problematic for you in one way or another.
Absolutely. And it
Hmm.
just feels so different now, like this season. I mean, I am relaunching my mastermind, but I don't hold any like trauma to the last
Yeah.
mastermind or the last one-on-one clients or the falling out with the client. It's
Hmm.
very much coming from a new excited place of, just because that has happened doesn't mean that that's going to happen again. And the new energy that's coming with it. I am so different now. Everything that I teach is so much more deeper and embodied now. And I just know that you just get a feeling, that you're on the right path again.
Right. Yeah, and it's so interesting. And thank you for sharing your story
Yeah.
because one way that people go through it, cycles within cycles, but actually becoming a mother takes you through that whole chaotic death and rebirth and refiguring out what your identity is. But you just described it happens without that too, but it's like a very similar, all encompassing. You question everything and you have to kind of put the pieces back together. But
Yeah.
that's the whole thing is Saturn is all about fortifying a strong foundation. So you kind of have to like
Mhm.
tear everything down to get back to that
Yeah.
foundation so that you can start building on stronger ground.
Absolutely. And it's just about trusting that process too. But even looking back when I was shifting my business to go fully passive. I remember I flew to Toronto to meet my coach for a VIP day where she was going to show me what this is going to look like, and how we're going to build this out and all of that. And I just remember crying in my hotel room and something just felt off. I was like, can I do this? And it wasn't coming from a place of like my capabilities. Like, of course I can do anything I set my mind to, but it was coming from a place of something didn't feel aligned. And I've never been really in tune with that until now. But back then I just was like, I think I'm just scared. I think I'm just scared because this is a different business model. But the whole business model was so new to me and it didn't feel right. And I had that feeling. But I was like, doesn't matter. We just paid this coach.
Right.
Like, we just paid for this. We made this decision. We did not relaunch the mastermind. We let go of our one-on-one clients. Like, we made this decision. We're going with it.
Yeah.
But I still remember that moment that I was like, huh. And then it was fleeting. It went away. And I was like, no, I can do it. Like, I can do anything. I can do this. But I'll never forget that feeling, because now coming back to coaching, mentorship, launching where I was before that, and it feeling so aligned and me not questioning at all if I'm doing the right thing. I'm like, okay, this is what it's supposed to feel like, but had to go through that to know for sure.
Well, like, it goes to show, you're an Aries. That's going to show up in one way or another. Whether that is, like you said, you were on the quote wrong path, but you were like, well, I made the commitment. I'm, rocket ship emoji, like I'm going forth, is one way to express it. But then more of a deep understanding of what doing your sun is, what makes you feel centered, what gives you energy, and getting back to those basics of your sun and your moon. You're not going to feel energized and centered if you're not launching, basically, if you're not doing that Aries leap, as part of things. And if you're not able to create those intimate spaces that feel like home, but actually working with clients.
I can't remember who said it to me, actually, but someone said to me, you will coach again. Like, you will be a mentor again. I was like, no, I won't. And they were like, well, it's just like when you get hurt in a relationship. Are you never going to fall in love again? Are you never going to open up your heart to someone again? It's like, you will. You just have to like go through this like anger phase.
Right.
But
another way Aries expresses,
So there you go. But, and again, I can't remember who said it, but they were like, you will open yourself up to it again. And they were absolutely right, because that's exactly what it feels like, because I don't hold any grudge to that client or that experience anymore. Or that previous mastermind of mine that I felt like I burnt down. Like, I'm rebranding, I'm starting over. There's no attachment at all. It's like the cords were cut. Like, it just feels completely brand new. So that really is what it's like, of just opening back up again after a bad relationship.
And I love that it was grounded into that metaphor for you that you use in your work anyway around what launching is. You're like, okay, ready to start dating again. Okay, so there's one more thing that I want to bring in as part of the story of this reemergence for you. Sure. I find it so interesting that the way that you came back on the scene was first to go in a totally other direction and build this other business of this Airbnb in Austin. That's super cute. So one of the things that we talk about in my Cosmic Cash Code session is your money mode. And there are 3 of them. So we're all kind of in 3 camps. People that are entrepreneurs that are part of my world are usually one of 2 of them. And we actually have the same one. So I like to compare them to the different kinds of relationships, getting back into that metaphor. There's the lifers, which these are the people that are not typically entrepreneurs. These are the people that kind of like find their company and just stick with it. And then there's the cardinal money mode. These people I like to call the serial monogamists. They really like to go the distance, go the full story with one thing before they feel complete with it, ready to make it passive or, give it some other place in their business. And then their energy kind of pours over and spills into the next thing. Then there are the mutable money mode people, which I call the polyamorous. And that is your money mode and my money mode. And so what I always like to tell people, because people that don't have this money mode are like, oh my God, that sounds so chaotic. We're basically like jugglers, And And they don't get it because for the other entrepreneurial camp, which is the serial monogamy people, they would just feel spread too thin, right? And they're like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't get it. And what I always explain to them is, first of all, I think it's probably some kind of ADD thing in me. I don't know, in terms of identifying with it. But for me, it's like, I need healthy distraction. I need to bounce between things. And I find that what I learn in one area of my business, I want to immediately turn and apply to another area of my business, right?
Yep.
Can you relate?
Yep. No, absolutely. And sometimes I see it as a negative. I'm like, damn, I'm so impulsive. Like when I want something, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
There is no question. Same with what we were just talking about of that feeling in the hotel room of, is this right? I was like, I don't care. Like, I'm going for it. I
Mm-hmm.
already made the decision.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't falter in my decisions. And so the whole house buying process was very impulsive. And I just was like, nope. I want to do this and I want to create an Airbnb and it's going to be super girly and on brand and fun and I'm going to market it using my skills. And literally within 3 months, we had bought a house in a
Mm-hmm.
completely different state, city, all of that. And so, no, I absolutely relate to that. And the only reason I felt confident in doing it was because I was able to, like you said, turn around and use the skills that I have in sales and marketing to apply to, marketing the new business.
Yeah, and I love hearing how you talk about the bridge between the two. You very
Mhm.
much use it's almost like a psychedelic mindset where it's all just kind of like a hall of mirrors and everything is
Yeah.
informing everything else, like a dream, you
Totally.
know?
Oh my gosh, totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, it's so funny because it's such a powerful thing for, I mean, that's like so typical entrepreneur too. Like we love to create and just like build new things all the time.
Hmm.
And so that was me. I was like, oh, I want to go do this. I want to go do this. I want to go do this. And I had saved up so much money from my coaching over the past couple of years. And the logical thing is like, I've been married for 2 years. This is the time of my life where I should be thinking about kids. But my brain was not like settled down, even though I'm starting to go in that direction. And I
Yeah.
think that's such a completely other phase of life. So it's not even settling down. But at the time, my brain was like, no, I don't want to settle down right now. I want to go on to the next thing. I want to build something with this money. I want to do something new. I want to create. I want to
Yeah.
innovate. You know what I mean? And so that's such a powerful thing. But then sometimes I'm like, I was probably a little impulsive with that decision. It's also, it can be, I don't want to say a negative thing because I always try to look on the positive side, but there's a dark side to it for sure.
Indeed. And also, it's one of my favorite things to share because it does end up being a permission slip. To your point, it's easy to judge it and think that you're
Yeah.
being flighty or non-committal or
Yeah.
impulsive or whatever. And it's like, no, this is actually how I'm designed to make
That's
money,
just who I
you
am.
know? Yeah. And
Exactly.
with the two, the common ground is we get bored easily, right? But it's a
Yes.
question of like for some people, they like to, okay, I'm bored here. I'm going to go over here and fully play out this story
Yeah.
before I get that itch again. Then there's people like us where we're like, oh, I'm constantly over here, over here, over
I
here.
want to
And
do
we're
this. I
kind
can
of
do
like
this.
building all
Yeah.
these different things in tandem.
And I have a husband who's an instigator because he thinks I'm the queen of the world and just supports me in everything that I do. So
Oh.
he's just like, yeah, you should do that. You should do that. You should do that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, wait, so I need somebody in my life
Like a
to hold me
buffer.
back.
Totally. Oh my gosh, this has been so fun. Thank you
So
so
fun. No,
much.
thank you so much for having me. I mean, before we even hopped on the recording, something that Lauren had said to me was, this might not be something out of left field that you didn't know about yourself, but it's more about affirming, all of this to you. And I definitely feel that. I think that this was really good. And hey, you got me to open up about something that I haven't yet. So that just speaks to you as well. Talk
Mm.
about making each other feel comfortable, right?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that reflection. I'm so excited to see now that you are landed on 2 feet on the other side of the transformation that you shared that you went through and your Saturn return
Yeah.
and whatever it is that you're gonna, dive into next.
Yes, I'm so excited. Thank you.
Yay. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And to everyone listening, thanks for tuning in.